What was your dream career as a child at that young age?
So the story goes, at 3 years old, I had a pet tortoise called Speedy, and back then they were all called Speedy, and it was always written on the back of their shell, usually in nail varnish, not mine. And a phone number was always written on the back of the shell. And this Speedy tortoise used to escape out of the garden and used to get phone calls. Tortoises back in the garden. Anyway, one day Speedy had a wound on his leg, and in the wound was a maggot, which is the larvae of a blue bottle fly. And I genuinely remember this. I got a twig from the garden and I scooped out the maggot and gave it a clean, and the leg got better and the tortoise got better, and I had the feeling of making an animal better, and helping an animal, and that was it. And from then on, from 3 years old, all I wanted to do was help animals. Yeah, it's weird. So in a weird way, what I wanted to do was so easy and straightforward, because it was the only thing I ever wanted to do from the beginning, and there was never ever any variation. And I knew I had to get into vet school, so I studied and was a nerd and a geek, and I think back then we called them squares, losers. And I just carried on working and doing homework and hoarding information and anything I possibly could. Duke of Edinburgh's award, working at the local vets in my teenage years and holidays and weekends. Anything I possibly could to guarantee or give myself the best chance to get into vet school. Because back then, as it is now, it's one of the hardest degrees to get into. Mainly because it's so popular, but also because there's few vet schools. So there's always a number of candidates trying to get into for every position. But yeah, I eventually got into Edinburgh University, and then I could kind of learn how to socialise and interact with other people, because before then I was still very shy, very introvert, because all I wanted to do was be a vet. And the other thing I was always obsessed with was comedy. So I used to write out comedy, watch comedy, record it, write it out, recite it. Back then it was sort of Blackadder. It was that era. Saturday Night Live, Friday Night Live, and Young Ones. And yeah, it was nerdy, nature, geeky, science, animals, and then comedy. Those were my two loves, and football as well. So yeah, I had a bit of a weird upbringing. It wasn't a normal one. My sister was the rebel. She was 4 years older, and she went out drinking and partying and being a normal person. I was the sort of reclusive one that just preferred to stay home and study and draw out ordnance survey maps for fun. Yeah.
And so you seem like you were a bit of an anomaly in the family. Would you say that's probably correct?
I think I was a bit of an anomaly in society, to be honest with you, not just my family. I definitely felt alone, but I was with my friends who were usually four-legged, all swimming in a pond.
And so you remember that. It's interesting that you remember that young memory at the age of 3 with the maggot story. And I think a lot of children would not react in that way. So it's interesting that you had that like nurturing kind of innate thing about you that was so clear from such a young age. Tell me about like your siblings. Were you the youngest? Were you the oldest?
Just the older sister.
Just the older sister.
And I always had a cat growing up. Never had a dog. Always had a cat. First one called Susie. Next one was called Fluffy. Briefly one called Rabbit. But I always had a pet cat. And tortoise in the early years. And then all the other stuff, the butterflies and the tadpoles, were sort of extra pets, if you like, bonus pets.
Yeah. So what would you do with the butterflies?
Just be fascinated by them. So we had the big butterfly bush outside our house, where I grew up in North West London, and obviously for a nature nerd, just to identify them, sometimes catch them, hold them, release them. Fascinating. Caterpillars, the eggs that they lay, the butterflies lay. Finding a chrysalis was like Christmas. So yeah, I was fascinated. And also all the other stuff like capital cities, flags. I remember going on a school trip to Switzerland and learning all the canton flags, so the county flags in Switzerland, which are on every number plate. I can still do it now. I can still. The other day, I went to a dog show, and a Swiss car parked next to us.
Yeah.
And I said, that's from Vol. And they were like, how on earth do you know that? I was like, I can't remember what I did yesterday, but I can remember learning my Swiss canton flags 40 years ago. Not even learning, just wanting to know.
Yeah.
Because learning sounds forced, but it was literally wanting to know everything about every country and just hoarding information.